So I will just count us down and we will go. All right, in 3, 2. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Jeff Rick here, coming to you from the home studio for another episode of Turn the Lens, and we're excited for this next episode. This guest has been involved with software productivity at the human point of view for years and years and years, driving huge development teams at Google. Then she left and now she's doing her own thing. We're excited to welcome him, probably from San Francisco, I'm guessing, through the magic of the internet. She's Melody Meckfessel, CEO and co-founder of Observable. Melody, great to see you.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you too, Jeff.
Absolutely. So I was looking, the last time we talked, hard to believe it's been almost like 2 years, how time flies. A lot of developments, of course, in this crazy space in which we choose to play. I just want to get you kind of your observations in terms of how things have changed over the last couple of years, where you're at with Observable. Give us a kind of a quick update on what's happening in DataViz.
Yeah, it's. I think there's a lot of ties back to what we talked about before, and we've just seen an acceleration, really, of demand from software developers and data analysts and data scientists, and just really teams and organizations trying to use DataViz faster, make it easier for folks to ask questions, get answers, and move quickly. More DataViz forms. More great open source options out there, Observable Plot being one of them, built on top of D3, pretty widely used data visualization library. So that's been an incredible development in the last 2 years of being able to create, charts and graphs in minutes instead of having to spend maybe longer time. The other thing that I would highlight is that the modern data stack continues to evolve, but practically companies are trying to find ways to make sense and do a lot of blocking and tackling with what's happened in terms of complexity of people's data stacks. How do you navigate that? How do you have visibility into differences and validation and metrics definitions that maybe you have in one layer of abstraction of your data stack? How are you comparing that to other definitions that are evolving in other parts of your stack? So it's been really fun to work with companies and teams in Observable to do not just like really important blocking and tackling, but bring more speed and ease to how people are doing that. Things like lightweight data apps, we're always going to have dashboards, right? We're always going to need to look at data in this like visual way. But how do you have things that are like really lightweight and interactive and maybe last for like a month and then you're on to the next one? It's kind of fun. It's like modern app development, but with data.
So let's jump into some of the specifics because everybody wants to be more data centric. We're trying to get more people using data in their decision making processes, not just at the data scientist level. And one of the interesting things you've talked about before is kind of this interactivity with the data. And you just talked about in your answer, which cute, kind of questions and answers, and this concept of exploration versus kind of knowing what you want exactly and then writing it and getting the answer, but more this interactivity that changes over time as you get more information. And you can speak to the power of that and how you see that play out, within the community, because that's a very different kind of engagement model.
Yeah, that's a great prompt because there are a lot of people out there that do important data work in spreadsheets. It's tabular data. You get to filter. You get to add formulas, you get to add logic, right? And actually business logic through AppScript and other forms of coding in spreadsheets. But there's a ton of folks out there that also know SQL and know how to query their data, their live production data sources. So we have these modes that we're kind of used to working in and take for granted. And what we're seeing is that when you can bridge those, when you can have an interface which is similar to working with tabular data in a spreadsheet, but opt out to SQL to do something custom, you can move very fast working with your production data. So you have these different modes or contexts that people are used to working in.
Right.
I don't remember the last time you were in a spreadsheet, Jeff, but
10 minutes ago.
I remember it was like this morning I was looking at spreadsheet data. I was also looking at our production data. So I think these are very relevant ways that people explore. And you have a question, you iterate, and there's something new. There's like an aha that pops up out of that. And it doesn't have to be super complex. We're not talking about visualizations that are on, major media news outlet. We're talking about, I want to understand, like, are sales spiking in this particular reason? I can play around with the data and I can look at the products maybe that are selling faster than others. I mean,
Right.
all these very practical questions that people have. So I would say, like, bringing those spreadsheet-like tabular ways of looking at data, fast filtering, search, really fast search, and then having this option to opt out to write SQL and then come back into that spreadsheet-like interface, that really has lit up people just being able to move very quickly when they're exploring and analyzing their data.
Right. And it just really speaks to the way that we learn and discover, right? Because as you continue to get more data and your hypothesis maybe changes, or maybe you just find a different alleyway that you want to run down and explore that you didn't necessarily know was that interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing that you've talked about before is kind of the analysis of the data versus the presentation of the data.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, the people that are engaged with that data and the output of that data are a lot more than just the data scientists. There's product managers, there's marketing people, there's sales executives, there's executives in the company. And that before there was always this kind of break between do the analysis, kick out a beautiful PowerPoint and then present it to the team. Where now you guys are finding ways to bring more people into that iterative process so that everyone can see and manipulate and explore the data all kind of in one single place.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge anyone, whatever your tool that you're working in, when you're working with data, it can be really chaotic, right? As we just talked about, you have these questions, your questions evolve, your answers evolve. That process it's chaotic, it's messy, it's iterative, right? So when people are coming together and they're working quickly between this kind of data analysis and manipulation with a visualization and can loop through pretty quickly, you kind of get to the aha faster. But then, like, that aha is just, it's not just for you and maybe a colleague or two to talk about. You want to share that, right? You want to get input. And so the fact that you can add interactivity to that data viz and have the exec or the product manager or the marketing manager then iterating with you on that data viz and asking questions together really opens up bringing the skills that your organization has into that process. And it's, collaboration's table stakes, Jeff. Like, what we're trying to do is deepen the conversation that happens around data. That happens when people work together, but it happens when people work together and they have the tools that's aligned with their experience. So we see a lot of examples of small teams iterating on data quickly, building that data viz, and then sharing it in their organization, but sharing it in a way that lets people explore the data through that visualization. And they do that through search and through sliders and through prompts. And everyone's part of it, right? I think we don't live in a world anymore where any sort of business decision maker, line of business owner is not in the weeds with their data, right? Like the urgency in the market, the importance of looking at the freshest data, the freshest set of analysis, that's just part of the world that we're in. And I think we want a way for all the skills in an organization to be brought to bear on some of these important questions and insights that companies have around their data.
That's great, because it's the ability to double click, right? It's to double click and explore a particular area of interest that you want to go down that maybe the original person didn't think was of that interest. I think it's such a different model than getting a summary report of things that happened in the past versus, kind of all the data rolled up that's happening now that you can make decisions. It's a very different time frame.
Yeah, I mean, there's this word, transparency. Like, I think it's one of these big words. It's like collaboration, right? It's one of these big words to say. I think what it means when people are looking at the data together, when they are looking at the analysis together, when they are looking and exploring the data viz together, that's a depth that doesn't happen when you're looking at like a pre-canned chart or a pre-can, like a template into a pre-canned chart with lots of limits around it. Because when people come together in this way where they're able to interact through the visualization, they keep going, right? They keep going. And that's the depth that businesses need to get to have that kind of strategic advantage.
Right.
So
great.
I think that's what we're seeing in the market. In 2 years, much more urgency around everyone in your organization being able to do this data work or do some dimension of it that applies to the expertise that they're bringing into the company.
Right. Or at least some literacy around it, right? Even if, you know, at least to start thinking in data-centric ways, start to ask data-centric questions, even if you're not necessarily, starting that way. The other piece I want to explore a little bit, and I don't know if it's the open source component per se, or just kind of the way you guys have architected, but this concept of save as, which is my word. I don't know if smart people talk about forking code and this and that, but to me, it's, to the layman, it's this save as where you don't have to start with a blank piece of paper. I mean, the world is so much easier if you're not looking at a blank when you get started. So to be able to start with something, to start with a model and then fork it and take it a different direction and then leverage the community, I think that's another really powerful piece of your story.
Yeah, I mean, you and I both know, like, open source, it's changed. The model has changed how we think about all of software development, and open source has been built into Observable in two really important ways. You raised the first one, which is this idea of save as or make a copy, right? And then get going with your own ideas or your data set, shifting it in a certain way. And then maybe you fork and you make suggestions back to the author, right? That's the open source style of contribution. That's possible when working with data visualizations now, especially on Observable. We see the majority of community members and our new customers start with these save as, right? Like, find a great example, a live viz that you want to then make your own. And that way, no one should ever expect to start from a blank slate. We want to make it easy for folks to get started. The other path that I would say that's really important principle for me working in software development with teams large and small is that we always want people to use what makes them productive, right? And there are open source libraries that are out there that are just really incredible to get started from. And so we've integrated with a lot of those open source libraries. The two most important visualization ones that we integrate with are, of course, D3, which allows you to create very complex, bespoke data visualizations. And last year, we launched Observable Plot, which is to build charts, in minutes, and really provide that full range, the bookends of like, use the right tool for the right job, and have the things on platform that are going to make you productive. And open source is just, it is the way that that's done. And that's what we followed in Observable.
Well, that was a great segue, because I was just going to say, let's shift gears and talk about one of your other favorite topics, developer productivity. So thank you for that. I know that's something that you've been focused on for a long, long time. I remember Dave Resin at a Google show talking about early Google days thing, and we just need to automate this stuff. The rate of growth is not sustainable with hiring people. So as you think about developer productivity, what are some of the latest things that you're doing to help people? I think you had a great line too before. Each one, remove the toil, remove the mundane, let people get to work and do what they're doing. So what are some of the latest things that you're seeing in terms of productivity as we try to get more and more people in this world?
I think part of it starts with education. So of course, I want to talk about automation and tools in a second. I think there's so much opportunity when you are community based, and we kind of talk about it as like finding your data people, finding your data peeps. When you're in community, you really have an opportunity to learn and teach each other, and having great tutorials, having great courses. We just launched an Intro to Data Viz course on the platform. I think this is something that community members should expect. I'm working on a particular tasks. I'm working on this data viz, this chart in my day job. And I'm also trying to grow my skills. And more people are coming to data viz and data analysis every day.
Right.
So how do we help wherever you are in your journey? Your expectation should be that you have this like ongoing education that's part of the community. We have community members that are launching workshops and sharing how-tos to work with like the latest and greatest piece of data infrastructure that's out there on the web. So that understanding and grounding in ongoing education, the importance of it. Data visualization itself is in its infancy. New forms are going to be created, new data analysis techniques that enables those forms. That's all going to be going on, right? So I think that's something that's really an important expectation of the community. And I think the other thing that I would say is that in what we just spoke about before, this idea of save as or always having a starting point,
Right.
More folks are creating templates. So if you think about different data questions in, say, retail, or like think about supply chain in the last couple of years, creating templates that can be that structural frame for people to get started from. And then the last thing that I would say is when you're working in the environment, at least in Observable, it is really this combination of notebook and like integrated development environment. So you think about, you should have autocomplete. You should have the function prompt there when you're searching. You should also have access to put really easy code snippets or starting points as you're working. And that can come through either like a drop-down UI, like I'm going to pick this component and it's going to be here, and maybe I manipulate it and change it, or I just use it out of the box. So I think there's like the big and small, right? Of like start with the code snippet or have the fully formed example for you. And then finally, I would just say this idea of importing is like, it's like magic, like reusing code in a way that have been created in the community directly for the job that you have at hand means that you focus on like the actual piece of work that you're doing. You focus on the specific task that you have at hand because you've got imports, you've got code snippets, you've got templates, and you've got working examples. And then if you get stuck, like you can go ask someone a question on the forum. You can go out to the internet to get the answer to your question, or you can take a pause and go do a deep dive on a particular chart type or piece of code that's going to help you in creating that current data viz or the next one that you're going to create on your next job. So I don't know, that kind of like, that's how I think about what's happening right now. And that's how I think about like my expectation as a software developer in the data viz space or a data analyst is that I should have all those. Like it shouldn't be unique to a particular role.
Yeah, it's so interesting that it should be it's so much easier and there's so much automation. And yet I know another big theme that you like to get behind is we need to make it even easier, right? And you've talked about training and, there's the great resignation followed by the great layoffs. And now I think it's kind of the great reshuffle, and this idea that certifications and people, have kind of a different education path now to learn specific skills during the night or during their day job to get into fields like data visualization. And I know that's a big passion of you. And I've been posting a lot lately of teachers getting into technology and lots of different people. So when I know, how are you kind of getting behind that mission? Because I know it's super important for you to make tech more accessible to a much broader population than just the smartest engineers coming out of the top schools.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. It is super important to me personally, but also to what we're trying to do at Observable. And that's a big part of the educational courses and workshops and tutorials and live stream events that we're doing all the time. We currently have a couple of folks in the team that were ex-professors. They love to teach and they love to build. And I think a lot of folks out there feel that way. Like when I learn something, how do I pay it back? How do I share what I know? And then I think in terms of career progression, there's all sorts of paths that I've seen of designers becoming data developers, and data developers also having to split their responsibilities to do part analysis work. collaborations that data scientists are doing with analysts and developers. So these boundaries, like titles and roles, are blurring, and they're blurring more and more every day. And as part of that, you as a person, you still want to demonstrate and show through your work. So we see people sharing what they create on the platform as a public reference or sort of resume, so to speak, about what they focus on and where their skills are, and have actually, gotten jobs out of that public display of their work. I think the other part of it is like that ongoing certification. You brought that up, especially in an industry that's moving so quickly, to be able to publicly say, like, I am skilled, I have these competencies. You can go look at other folks also that have demonstrated these skills. And the quality and depth of the certifications that are out there are really, they're incredible. They're getting better every day. So I think this kind of operating in the public has a lot of value for me, as even in the early stage, being able to show publicly the skills that I have and what I'm capable of, and then continue on that journey as far as you can possibly go.
Right.
So yeah, we're offering certifications. We're really interested in doing collaborations with other educational institutions. And actually, we're Observable today is used in really kind of significant portion of educational institutions, university programs, even high school programs, Jeff, are using data visualization, elementary schools. It's pretty wild to see how, if you have access, the tools to do this work, how much you can teach for folks that are interested in learning.
Right. I mean, it's so much there. I mean, we'll get so much more innovation through the democratization of these tools, right? More people, experimenting, asking more questions with access to the data and access to the tools are going to find new things and have new discovery. I think it's so important. And then the other thing, right, is the jobs. I was talking to somebody the other day whose kids looking at schools for certain topics. I'm like, the jobs 20 years from now don't even exist, a lot of them. So, this concept of continuous learning and then also, providing skills training for roles that are open, that there just aren't enough people. I mean, they're just not there. So, hire for attitude, train for skills, because even today's skills are going to start getting stale tomorrow. So, I mean, you really got to have this kind of continuous learning attitude, and certainly an open source ethos and sharing in a community is a big supporting piece of the success of that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about all the buzz right now, which is LLM, large language models. You've been involved with big data sets for a long time. As you just kind of sit back and hear the buzz, what kind of goes through your head in terms of kind of what's the potential, what do people need to kind of settle down for, what makes you excited about, kind of this change that's happened in the last 6 months, at least in the noise level, if not necessarily in the technology, but I think there's been some pretty significant technology breakthroughs as well.
Yeah, I think it's been incredible. And in the theme of how do you help people continue to increase their productivity, I think there's a big lift that is coming from the assistance from all of these tools. The assistance, the level, the quality of suggestions, I think will continue to improve. I think the thing that I keep coming back to, though, is that it's an assist. I think if people are viewing it as a complete replacement, we still have more work to do. So, in the developer productivity space, in the data space, we're going to continue to see integration of just how rapidly things are evolving with LLM. And you think about, the AI assist kind of apps and tools that are coming into play. I mean, there's more every day that are being released. And I think that gets at, there's a lot of technology and a lot of work that we do that we should have this assistance when. We've had it for a long time in like code editors and code tools, but it hasn't been at the level of kind of scope and speed that we're seeing today. And so I am really optimistic and also interested to see how folks that are coming new into technology use these to assist them. I think there's always going to be a case to go deeper and learn. And when I have in the past been in situations where, I'm just copying and pasting, like the craft and the depth of the problem solving starts to, like go away. And then kind of what creative space are we in
Right.
with data and with technology? Because so much of that is about the business problem that companies, the questions that people have and the business problems that they have, and that's evolving quickly. So I'm really curious to see where it goes. I think that there's a lot of benefit that can come with it. I don't think it completely removes the learning that needs to happen for people that are working with data. If you think about everyone in the world having some data literacy, just like we learn to read and write and communicate, there's an aspect of that you bring your own learning and your own perspective to, and then you have the tools and the assistance and the automation to do that. So that I think we're going to see a lot of growth in this space.
Yeah. Well, even just assuming that it's successful for helping remove toil, right, and setting up basic things
Exactly.
to enable you to get to the higher level function of the business that you know really well, or kind of the nuance of the data that you want to explore, to be able to get to that starting point faster, if that's in fact what it enables. Again, I think for innovation, it's just more people having more access to more data and more tools, and as Scott Cook says from Intuit, trying more low cost experiments to discover new things. I think it's pretty interesting in trying to drive more of this data centricity, which we all need.
Well, I think you hit on a really important point, which is when we don't worry about the cost of pursuing an idea, right? If the cost, meaning both like time, like the time to explore that idea is really low, really interesting creativity and innovation will come out of that, because we will pursue those ideas, right? We won't hold back. We'll take more risks. If we can move quickly and kind of cut it off when it doesn't go in the direction that maybe was expected for the outcome, I think that's it, right? Like that's the benefit of your save as, where if you can just keep pursuing other people's ideas and new concepts and you have this assistance and you don't have a lot of toil, like, I mean, we're already seeing it, right? We're already seeing an incredible amount of creativity and innovation happen around this space.
Right. And it's barely even got started. I mean, it's,
I know.
and then of course there's all the backside issues as well, in terms of ethics and choices and data sets and bias and, a whole host of hornets nests that are getting kicked here. But ultimately, most people feel pretty strongly that the upside benefit is pretty high. I just want to close on kind of the last topic, and that's really kind of DevOps and kind of open source, but really more like Moore's Law was, to me, more about the thought process than necessarily the math behind microprocessors. But this attitude of continuous development, right? This get it out, get a minimum viable product out, and just this iterative process. And we're seeing it specifically in this OpenAI space, where they're even saying they put the models out on purpose so that people can try them and test them and see what happens. So I think the proliferation of this technique is probably much more significant than most people give it credit for. And you've talked about it quite a bit, this kind of DevOps attitude, as opposed to necessarily just the DevOps process, which is this really powerful iterative process. You layer on open source with a broad community. Wow, it really moves the needle pretty quickly.
It does.
All right, Melody. Well, any final thoughts before I let you go back to playing with really cool charts and beautiful visualizations?
Yeah, no, I would say that just you mentioned DevOps, the idea of tooling being in service of the job that you're trying to get done, the practices, the processes, which is really like how people work together, collaboration, and then the culture. And to me, data-driven culture is, as soon as someone's asking you for like the metric or the dashboard, you're not in a data-driven culture. A data-driven culture is about curiosity. It's about asking questions. It's about listening and learning from other people's expertise. It's about listening to the data. And to me, what we're trying to do at Observable is really be in service of data-driven cultures in that way, where it is about exploration, it is about going deeper, and it's about the fact that there's so much data, we have to have visualization to do that.
Right.
And we need visualization without limits, without the staying in the box. We need to have the tools to use the spreadsheet-like interface, or write SQL ourselves, or maybe write some JavaScript to work with our colleagues and keep going. I think that's the world we're in, right? Like, it's going to keep moving quickly. And we, as people in all of our respective companies, need to move quickly with it, especially as it relates to our data. So I'm really excited about those practices that have been evolving quickly for software development coming to data practices. Like, this is the generational shift, I think, that we're in as it relates to data analysis and data visualization. So I'm really excited to be part of it. I'm really excited to contribute to it and have Observable help our community do that as well.
I love that summary. Data centricity is about exploration and then listening to the data and then doing something about it. That is a terrific summary. Well, thank you, as always, for all the work that you do and helping make devs more productive. Not to mention bringing the visualizations to the world. So thanks for all you do. All right, she's Melody. I'm Jeff. You are watching Turn the Lens. Thanks for watching. Listen on the podcast, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Sweet. Thank you.